DJ Event Planner will change the way you manage and run your business. Streamline all of your procedures and software into one easy-to-manage system. DJ Event Planner, the ultimate online planning tool.
Welcome to DJNTV and Tuesday Night with Ben Stowe. Now introducing the one and only Ben Stowe.
Yeah, baby! Yeah.
Here we are. It's Tuesday. Tuesday's our favorite night of the week. Why? Because we have... No, not tacos.
Taco Tuesday.
Not tacos. Let's try this again. Tuesday, your favorite night of the week. Because we have ice... No, we don't have that either.
Nah, I think the ice cream thing got all the airplay it's going to get, unfortunately. I kind of keep hoping, every time I hear a noise down the hall,
yeah.
Think, maybe it's ice cream, but it's not.
Well, so it's Tuesday night with Ben Stowe. It looks like it's just going to be us. Nothing really cool tonight, so it's sad reality. Sad reality. There we go.
But for those who stick around, misery loves company.
Yeah, so. There you are. Thank you for joining us tonight. We are broadcasting everywhere. If you're somewhere, we're there with you tonight. It's awesome. It's incredible.
Worldwide, baby.
Yeah,
Worldwide.
we are. And that's actually, we say that, but there's times where we have folks from South Africa. We've got people from the UK. We've got a few viewers from India. And I know these things because after the show, they're direct messaging and asking questions. And they are using Translate, and then I use Translate back, and it's kind of a fun little thing. It's amazing how two guys from central Minnesota or middle of Minnesota here are being seen all over the world, and they're wondering, why are they worried about snow this weekend?
Yeah, that's a real thing. Snow this weekend. So
Yeah.
just...
Yep. Today,
let's talk about something I like. Let's talk about DMX.
We're going to go to DMX and talk about that.
Let's not talk about snow.
But yeah, there's going to be, you'll see more things from Ben and I if you follow our personal Facebook pages. You'll see things this weekend that some of you don't even know what it is.
I'm not going to post snow. I'm not going to give snow any more airtime than it already gets. I'm not, you know what? I'm just, no.
You're just going to be a rebel. No, not going to happen.
I am.
So tonight we're going to talk about DMX. I wanted to have Ben go through and kind of give like 5 different little pointers or something that would help you in that DMX realm, because this is a common question about DMX. How can I make it better? How can I do this more efficiently? What do I need to know about it for those of you getting started with it? So Ben, let's jump right into it tonight with some ideas of making it a better experience.
Well, I think first and foremost, it's just like with anything else that I set about to do or I train people to do. The first question I always encourage people to ask is why? Why would you go DMX? And I think the obvious answer is that the ability to control lighting and to make it do things purposefully, that are working harmoniously with the rest of the production you're putting on, whether it be a wedding or a school or whatever it is. I think that's the why. DMX certainly gives you that ability to have exacting control over your lights. Now, that being said, I think some of the parts that frustrate people a little bit is one, the how, but 2 is that in order to have that control, you have to create that control. to a point. There are certainly some shortcuts with software and that sort of thing, and we'll talk about that in a little bit. But at the end of the day, I think DMX is not only, and I realize some viewers are going to throw things at the screen when I say this, DMX is not only easy, but it's very robust and it's very forgiving. It's a standard that's been around a long time. It operates on a very rugged cable. And we can get into cable a little later, but it's often confused just with a microphone cable. It is not the same, by the way, not the same, but it looks the same. So, a pretty ruggedized cable and a pretty forgiving, data transfer protocol. And it's easier than it's ever been before with software to get that exacting control. So there's kind of our why and a touch on the what and the how, which I'm sure we're going to dive into a little deeper.
Now, of course, you were talking about the types of events and that exacting control of the lights. Now, if we would have Brian Red, like right up here, right above us, he's not yes, he does do some things with DMX control of lights, but that really hasn't been a big part of his light show for a number of years. And he's been able to function successfully without that ability or that exacting control. So for some DJs, they may not really need it for what they're doing.
Yeah, I think it really is situational, and I think it's probably situational based on the event and also the fixture. But I'll tell you this: I think the real, and I've said this, years ago. This isn't new, but I think it's just increasingly more the case. The real battlefront is control. I think that if you are selling just pointing lights up a wall, for example, uplighting, if that's what you're offering, that doesn't mean it's bad. And it doesn't mean that you can't do well with it, but it does mean that you have a lot of competition because just about anybody can point a light up a wall. There's a lot of options on the market for lighting. It's pretty ubiquitous, and just about anybody can go take an uplight and point it up a wall. And so you're going to invite a lot of competition. Where you can really separate yourself is when you start getting into event design, even if just a little bit, just having the control and being able to make things all work together, like I said, harmoniously or in concert, and maybe move with the flow of the event. And then you can start doing things like maybe, bringing on and off accent lighting, stage lighting, table lighting, that sort of thing, situationally. Really, at that point, the what is kind of really up to your client, but you start adding all these options and you start separating yourself from people who can't do that. I guess for me, I don't remember a lighting gig that I've done in the last decade that I didn't use DMX. So it's just critically important to what I do. But again, I need that control over what I'm doing. Something has to happen when it's supposed to happen, and it's supposed to do something that's not random. Which kind of brings me to the when maybe not to. One of the examples I would say would be kind of one of these typical DJ effect lights that have a standalone mode and they're just kind of doing their own thing. You may find that programming those can be really useful because you can make it do what you want it to, but you may also find that to be really arduous and time consuming when all you want is we call it flash and trash, but the sound active mode just to do its thing.
Yeah.
Now, there is a happy compromise because many lights now have the ability to trigger a sound active mode via DMX. So you can have kind of the best of all worlds. But that's just one of those things. If you set up a tripod for a dance floor and you just want a light to kind of go and, the other, my favorite term is spin and puke light, maybe DMX isn't right for that. But certainly with event lighting and decor or any kind of thing going on like that, I think DMX can be really useful.
Excellent. So we talked a little bit about the why. And what did you have next? You were going to go to the what, the where, the who?
We could talk about the what. We could talk about the how too. Why don't I brought it just wouldn't be a Tuesday night if I didn't bring some show and tell.
Excellent.
So, of course, I think people are pretty familiar with DMX consoles that have faders on them. Pretty much everybody's seen those. I didn't show one because honestly, not a fan. They do the job, particularly for something simple, maybe, 3, 4, 5, 6 channel color mixing. Okay. Whatever. Not a fan. Software has gotten so easy to use and so inexpensive and so much more powerful that I think that's really, to me, that's just kind of the starting point. I just, again, I'm not saying don't get a hardware controller, I guess, but I'm saying I wouldn't. Software is easier to use, and computers are so inexpensive. You can get a cheap laptop to run them. And, you can get an interface like this one that basically connects between your computer and then your DMX output. And this one has 2 universes, and a DMX universe consists of 512 channels. So this gives me 1024 channels. Yeah. Just go with it. Anyway, so over 1,000 channels of control from a single, software program and a single USB cable for a few $100, pretty hard to beat that. Now, before I get into the other 2 software packages I've got over here, if you say, yes, but I like tactile faders, I want something besides just a laptop. Oh, I agree with you. Me too. So there are certainly options we can get into that are several $1,000s. We get into small production things like the MA2 on PC command wing, which is like, $5 or $6 grand or something. Forget all that. You don't have to do that. That probably doesn't make sense for most DJs, although it's a great rig. I'm certainly not going to talk you out of it. But there are much easier and less expensive ways to do that. Something like this.
Oh, yeah. Yep.
Can be MIDI mapped to Show Express, for example, or some of these, that was the interface we just looked at, or some of these other software programs, of which there are plenty. And now you have some buttons to trigger shows, you have some tactile faders, and you have some feedback. There's bidirectional MIDI on most of these programs now too. So the buttons will illuminate and indicate what the software is doing. And so you kind of have that ability now for, again, very little amount of money to have, the power and the ease and the flexibility of software, but also, the faders and some tactile interface.
Sure.
For those who kind of want, they want the power of software, but they don't necessarily need the exacting control, and they don't want all the work of programming. There are some other really good options. This one came out here a couple of years ago and has been pretty popular. Sound Switch.
Yeah.
Basically, it's just another interface like what we saw, except that the program that it uses does much of the heavy lifting for you. Mm-hmm. Now, again, don't expect the same type of exacting control that you used to, because you're giving up some of that when you ask for easy. But here again, we can see USB and an XLR output. Again, not to be confused with mic cable. More on that in a minute. And then there's another one where maybe you want to run it from an iPad or something. And again, we want easy, and we don't necessarily need all the control. ADJ released the My DMX Go, which has been, I would say, very popular. Where I see people running into issues with that is, again, when they want it to do what a more powerful program like a full version of My DMX or Show Express or something will do, but they don't want to program it. Well, it doesn't work that way. You really can't have it both ways. But that does have a lot of built-in settings, I guess, that we can affect onto our lights. And it gives you a lot of flexibility and ease. And it does simplify that programming process as long as you don't need quite as exacting level of control. And there's lots and lots more options. We could go all night.
You mentioned 2 universes with the Chauvet device. Now, when you get into that iPad device, that DMX Go you had there, how many different channels does that particular?
I believe, and I'm on the spot here, but I think out of the box you get 256 channels.
I was going to say, I think, it wasn't 512. I thought it was.
So it'd really be like a half a universe. And maybe we should clarify what a channel is. So let's just take a fictional LED Parcan that uses red, green, and blue color mixing. That could be a 3-channel fixture, just a channel for red, green, and blue intensity. Or maybe we add a master dimmer, now it's a 4-channel. Maybe we add a strobe channel, now it's a 5-channel. So, the channels really depend. I actually have a DMX coffee pot, which is a single channel device. But anyway, the channels depend on the profile of the light. Moving heads might have 14 or 16 channels, pan, tilt, color wheel, gobo wheel number 2, that sort of thing. Maybe an iris, prism. It really depends. So the moral of the story then is that if you had a series of these 3-channel LED par cans we just talked about, let's say you had 10 of them, you would be using 30 channels. So in that case, 256 channels would still be plenty. But if you have a bunch of moving lights and you have some, wash lights and things that maybe are 6, 8, 9 channels, that's where maybe that 1024 might be a lot more useful. And one of the things that I always tell people when they buy a program, like my DMX or Show Express, is I said, be prepared to want more lights. Because once you start getting into the programming and you realize how much fun you can have with it and how easy it is to create these things, you're going to start using more channels than you think you will. A good example is there used to be a version of Show Express called the Express 100, which had 100 channels. And I always try to talk people out of that. I said, no, trust me, you're going to run out of 100 channels faster than you think, because you're going to start realizing what you can really do with this and the different ways you can make money with this. And you're going to end up using more channels.
Yeah, very quickly. Yes.
Yeah. Show Express will actually run, I believe, up to 6 universes, and that may have changed. I'm not up on the latest version, but so now we're talking about a pretty significant amount of fixtures here.
Yep, it's certainly. Wow. Okay, so we talked about the why, and then we dug into some software.
I realized I had one more prop that's hidden down here.
Oh, it's ice cream.
It's not ice cream. And actually, I think it's gone. One other way, I guess this is as good a time as any to throw this in. One other way that we can send DMX is over Ethernet. Now, they are different protocols. They are not the same. But this device here uses Ethernet to send DMX universes. The theoretical max number of universes over an Ethernet cable is something like 37,000 or something. It's a lot. So, extraordinary. And that would be one of the benefits of doing that is, using standard Ethernet gear, standard Ethernet switches and that sort of thing. We could send lots of universes. Here you can see a single Cat5, 2 universes. And that's called a node, by the way. And we could do that with lots and lots of things. However, there's some drawbacks too. And I guess this will take us into the physical layer real quick, but Ethernet has a maximum length of about 300 feet, 100 meters, so 328 feet. DMX can go thousands of feet over good quality cable. So Ethernet doesn't gain you any distance. It actually reduces your distance significantly, but it gains you some other things, like the ability to use a single Cat5 to carry lots of universes.
Sure. Would there be a difference between a Cat5 carrying the signal compared to a Cat6 or a Cat7?
No, not really, because the standard is more limited than the cable itself.
Okay.
So obviously we start talking about gigabit Ethernet and that sort of thing versus 100 base. Is really no meaningful difference.
Okay.
And for our purposes, they're really interchangeable.
Okay. Excellent.
That may change, as these, but again, we're already talking about so many universes that I don't know that anybody's maxing out a Cat5 cable.
Yeah, that's a lot of possibility there.
Yeah, I think there's, and then that gets into a lot more advanced discussion, I think, than our viewers probably want to have right now. Maybe there's a few of you out there, but I think most are maybe still contemplating the My DMX Go or the Sound Switch or the Show Express. But there's things like streaming ACN and other advanced ways. That's the cool thing about DMX, though, is we're talking about very inexpensive devices available on virtually every DJ light, and it's still fundamentally the same way that we're controlling large-scale concert lighting. So that's pretty cool. Obviously, we're using things like ArtNet and streaming ACN and that sort of thing for large-scale concerts, but it's fundamentally the same DMX. So that says a lot about a protocol that has been around since 1991.
Yeah, and still going strong today. Okay, so we talked about the why, a little bit about some of the software and the how. What are we up to?
Let's talk about the physical layer, because this is where I see probably the places I see people make the biggest mistakes and or have the most trouble is either addressing, which is getting a lot easier now as lights have basically little LCD or LED displays. Many of them now have little LCD displays. They look like little phone screens, and you can, it's very easy to read and very easy to control. The dreaded dip switches have largely been relegated to history. But even with those, addressing isn't that bad. It isn't that hard. You just have to understand, what you're doing. And most software will automatically patch these fixtures for you and tell you what the addresses are. So that the software has made it very, very easy. In fact, you know what? I just made a patch list the other day, and I deleted it because I was done with it, but I'm going to resurrect it from my deleted files here, hopefully. And there you can see there's a DMX patch list from an event I just did the other day. So the software just generated that list for me and said, here are your addresses. And you can see there's only one universe, and I only used 160 addresses. So it wasn't that big of a deal, but a little small fundraiser event we did. Anyway, the computer just generated that to me, so I didn't really have to give it a lot of thought. I just I took a screenshot with my phone, and I texted it to the people working on the stage and said, make it so.
Sure.
So addressing, I think we could kind of move past. The thing that still does create problems for people, though, is the physical layer. And what I mean by the physical layer is the actual physical parts of DMX. And number one in that is going to be cable. So I mentioned it earlier. They look like mic cables, but they are not. It is not the same. Yes, it is an XLR connector, but people say, well, XLR cable. There's no such thing. That's a connector, and it's what's between that matters the most. So I realize that when you look at this cable and you say, well, it's rubber and it's black, and other than the fact that it says DMX on it, what makes it different? I don't know if it's going into focus or not.
We had it for a second there. It's back and forth.
All right, close enough. Well, let's take a look at what matters here. Let's take a look at the inside. And so here's a snipping of that exact same cable. This happens to be our Platinum Series DMX cable. And let's see if this will go into focus. I can't really tell. I might pop my screen up bigger here so I can see what you all can see.
You gotta go right in the middle, I think, for it to catch you.
It's a good lesson in focal length. Anyway, I don't know if it's going to focus here or not, but what you can see is a very nice tight braid here. And that's protecting us from, we'll call them large interference, like EMF. And then inside that, we have a foil shield here. And this foil shield is taking care of things like RFI and that sort of thing. And then inside our foil shield, and it's not typical that you would see both of those on a mic cable, inside those, we see this string is actually there to give us some strength as this cable gets coiled and uncoiled all the time. Helps it survive a long time. But then we also see our data conductors. And you can see that those are twisted together. And by twisting those together, anything that somehow does manage to get through our shields is going to arrive to both of our conductors at opposing phase and will cancel itself out. So we call that common mode rejection too, by the way. I'm going to change so it's not the big picture of me on my screen. I know viewers, you can't see it, but it's just really weirding me out to look at myself.
Actually, I went to, because of you showing things, I went to a large photo or large picture here too.
That way they
could see the braiding much easier.
Viewers, you had to see that. But something that we notice here is that this is a 3-pin XLR, and the DMX standard actually calls for, and never changed, calls for 5-pin XLR. The simple answer for why we see so much 3-pin stuff on the market is that we don't actually use pins 4 and 5 anyway. It does help prevent confusion, but of course we just end up with more expensive cables and we don't really necessarily need them. So often you will see things like this, which are adapters that convert 5 to 3. And there really is no magic. You're just not using pins 4 and 5.
So are they connected even though we don't use Are pins 4 and 5 actually connected when you buy the wire, or do you buy some? Is there some of those that may not have 4 and 5 connected?
Yes. Our 5-pin cable has all 5 pins wired, because there are companies that use pins 4 and 5 for proprietary things, like DC or TalkBack or that sort of thing. So we wire them, but there's also 5-pin DMX cables that don't have 5 wires inside, and they'll work just fine for standard DMX because it's only using 3 pins. So in fact, you'll notice this wire here only has 2 conductors inside, and then our shield. People often talk about shield as being the biggest difference in DMX cable and mic cable, and that's not really true. It's one of the big differences, but there are a few. The impedance is one. The characteristic impedance of DMX should be about 120 ohms, whereas a mic cable is going to be somewhere in the 70s. So a pretty big difference there. And also, and that's not where it ends either, there's also inductive and capacitive differences. DMX is a digital signal, so it's sending ones and zeros as opposed to analog audio. I guess the moral of the story is that electrically speaking, they are different. And you should use the right cable for the job. Mic cable is not interchangeable as DMX cable and vice versa. So that's why they make 2 different kinds of cable. Otherwise, they just make one. I mean, why make 2, right?
Right.
So something else that makes DMX different from audio is because it's a digital signal, we can't use a Y splitter. We see these sometimes in the audio world where you've just got, one connector and it goes out to 2 and it's just, physically all wired together inside. It's just a Y split. We can't do that in DMX because we're really not splitting the signal. It's a digital signal, so we're duplicating it. So I really wish they'd call them duplicators, but anyway, they still call them splitters for whatever reason. So here's an example. Here we can see a 4-channel splitter. And this one has, if you'll notice, we'll just tip it right up here. It has both 5-pin and 3-pin connectors on it.
Okay.
And that allows us to very quickly and easily connect both 5-pin and 3-pin on these different DMX buses, but to the same universe. And it also gives us not only, again, the ability to connect 4 different DMX buses, but also gives us some isolation between those. So if we have an electrical problem on one, we should be protected on the others and the controller from it. So that's a plus.
Otherwise, you could have electrical, kind of a feedback type of a situation?
Sure. Well, let's say something catastrophically goes wrong on one of your DMX buses, a massive short or a surge, or somebody spills water on a light or something. Everything is electrically connected. So if we didn't have some protection and some isolation, potentially everything on that, on those connected buses could be damaged. So that's just a bonus feature, I guess. Some people ask, now this one has an in and a through and then 4 outs. So ultimately we can end up with 5 buses, but you can't use both the 3-pin and the 5-pin on each bus at the same time, just one or the other. So otherwise you've just made a splitter out of your splitter.
I was going to say, that's probably not a good idea.
No, it isn't. And you know what? It's one of those things. If I had a nickel, as they say, if I had a nickel for every time somebody said, but I do it and it works, I'd be retired. I wouldn't be, I'd probably still be doing the show because because I really like you, John, but I'd be retired from everything but this show.
Yeah. Probably getting ice cream on a regular basis. And...
Yeah, I actually, you're right. I wouldn't be here. I'd have an ice cream shop and that would just be my retirement gig. But just because you do something and you get away with it doesn't mean it was a good idea. I think we could probably think about lots of situations in life where we knew we did something that we shouldn't have done and we got away with it. I was at a stop sign the other day, and as I was pulling to the stop sign past a railroad track, I saw the light of a locomotive way down the track. And I saw a lot of cars behind me, and I thought, I hope nobody does something stupid like park on the tracks. And thankfully nobody did, because we were stopped at a stop sign too, and there was traffic coming, so we couldn't go. But somebody did, of course, as soon as the crossing gate started to come down, somebody did kind of the, S curve through them. And I thought, really? Come on, man. One of my hobbies is I drive steam trains on a railroad. And fortunately, this didn't happen in one of our steam locomotives because they're very old and very precious, as you might imagine, any damage to them. But I actually hit a guy at a crossing one time at very low speed in a gas-powered track vehicle. And I was able to slow down sufficiently to cause very minor damage to his vehicle and mine, and none of my passengers were hurt. I was injured a little bit, just I was injured actually by the significant effort I was putting forth into stopping the vehicle. And I was pretty upset, obviously, because, trains can't turn.
Yeah.
So obviously I didn't have any option to not hit this guy other than to try to stop before I hit him, which I couldn't do. And he was just beside himself. He said, well, I thought I could make it, and he would have, except the car in front of him stopped.
Yeah.
And it's just one of those things where he didn't get away with that. But we've all had these situations where we've done something and we didn't get hit by the train. And again, fortunately, that was very minor and nobody was really injured. But using the wrong cable or, doing dumb things with, splitters we're not supposed to and that sort of thing, you may get it to work. It doesn't mean it was a good idea. And one day the train will hit you. One day the car in front of you will stop and you will find yourself stuck on the tracks staring at a guy who can't stop coming at you. And anyway, I don't know, that's a tough metaphor to use. But
there is a little, but there's enough there that we can grab onto and feel like we've had a moment.
I haven't really talked about that, actually. It's been
I've never heard the
time.
story. I've never heard
it. It was
about
interesting. I had a couple of young passengers on this small vehicle, and a couple of them were high school age, I imagined. And I asked them if either of them was driving yet, and they reported that it would be very soon. They were very excited about getting their learner's permit. And I said, well, what did we learn about trains? And they said, they can't stop. And I said, you're right.
Yeah, they don't.
Yeah. So just don't be on the tracks. The train will miss you if you're anywhere but on the tracks.
Yeah. It's only a small path in which it takes, but that's a path that you don't want to be on.
To bring us back to DMX, if you use the right cable and you connect your fixtures correctly and you terminate your bus, which was the other prop I was going to show you, and I seem to have lost it, but it was a little carbon film resistor. That's all that a DMX terminator is. It's a 120 ohm carbon film resistor. Soldered across pins 2 and 3, which is data true and data complement, or better said, our data pins. But if we do all those things, DMX is very robust and very forgiving, and it should work very reliably.
Excellent.
And it's fun. It's fun being able to control things.
Oh, especially at that level, when you want to have the exact thing happen at the exact moment, as you were saying. When you're doing your concerts, you definitely have to do that.
Well, and absolutely. And even at small scale events, I don't want to say small scale, but, even at events that many of our viewers are doing, the ability to have that control raises your value. It raises the stakes. And it separates you from what everybody else can do. So there's a designer that I work with, and I love her and I love to hate her. Because she will not be bothered by things like gravity or physics or anything like that. She has a vision, but if you can match that vision, and if you can, achieve her vision, from a technological standpoint, I'm the only guy she comes to. And, that definitely raises your value. Somebody says, well, I'll do it for, whatever. You can't do it at all.
Yeah, for sure.
So
the DMX. Excellent. Well, thank you, Ben. Thank you for putting some thoughts together for us tonight. Thank you guys for being with us this evening. I think we topped out at 87 people that were watching the shows on the main two channels there. So excellent. I see what you did there. So, let's see. Next week, we're probably going to be missing the Tuesday Night with Ben Stowe show. We'll probably be looking to see if Brian, if it works out that Brian's going to be running the Tuesday night show next week, because I will be going to Louisville next week. So
nice.
Yeah, we're going to go down there for a outdoor industries event. So it'll be kind of fun.
I will go get ice cream.
Yeah, you can get ice cream, and we'll go with that. And we'll be back in a couple of weeks with, should be back again. So once again, thank you guys for being with us tonight. Have yourself a wonderful evening, and we'll be back in about 25 minutes with the great DJ debate with Jay Brannon and Brian Redd. Should be fun. We'll catch you then.
I want to see this. I want to see this.
It'll be crazy. Good night, everybody.